Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Sam, sam, sam. Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya Bhante.
So welcome back everyone to our weekly Sutta class. So today I wanted to teach you a few suttas, few discourses. Two are quite small, another is longer from the Majjhima Nikaya, middle length discourse of the Buddha. So let's first send out links to all the discourses so it's easier to find them. The first one is Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 19, the Duidhavitaka Sutta. So if someone could send out a link to that, and then, okay, very good. Then the next suttas, I have to check if the discourse on Sutta Central is the same as in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Give me one moment to do that. Okay, the next discourse on Sutta Central is Anguttara Nikaya Book of Threes, Sutta number 95. If someone could send a link to that. Parisa Sutta on Sutta Central, Anguttara Nikaya 3.95. Then the third discourse is 3.124 in the Anguttara Nikaya. So you can prepare with those links and we can little by little go through all of these. Okay, very good. So to begin today, today's topic is the kind of thoughts that we think, examining our thoughts. So it's really amazing in the Buddha's teaching, when we learn the Buddha's discourses, the Buddha explains to us what kind of thoughts are good to think, what kind of thoughts are beneficial for ourselves and others, and also what kind of thoughts we shouldn't think, what kind of thoughts harm ourselves and harm other people. So this is really amazing, the Buddha's realization in this way. So the Buddha, of course, can read other beings' minds, right? And the Buddha has a realization of karma and its results. So the Buddha understands how certain thoughts collect bad karma and how certain thoughts collect good karma. And then beings reap suffering and happiness accordingly, according to the way they think. Not only that, but also we act according to how we think, right? So first we think about something, and then we either speak or we act with our body, right? So our actions are preceded by our thoughts, our mind. So that's why in the Dhammapada, the first two verses in the Dhammapada, if you remember them, so Mano Pubbangama Dhamma, Mano Setta Manomaya, Manasachi Paduttena Bhasadiva Karotiva, Tato Nandukhamang Veti, Chakkang Vabhato Upadan. So mind precedes all things. Mind is their chief. They are mind-made. If one thinks, if one speaks or acts with an impure mind, then suffering follows one like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. And likewise, if we think with a pure state of mind, then happiness follows us like a never departing shadow, chaya vanapayini. So these verses actually have a very deep meaning. It's not just about good and bad karma, but to begin with these set of discourses that I wanted to teach you today, we should understand how our thoughts affect ourselves and the world around us. So a happy person lives in a happy world, right? And a depressed person lives in a depressed world. So someone is sitting next to us and they maybe have mental disorder and they have depression. But our experience of the world is quite different from theirs if we don't have such depression, right? So our experience of the world is influenced by our mind, our mental state. So if we learn the Buddha's teachings and learn how to purify our mind, then we can live happily. Because we are removing the causes for suffering. The causes for suffering are internal things, not external things, not external circumstances, political situations, problems in the country, problems at work, at home. So all of the problems, all of the suffering that we experience in life is rooted in our own minds. So that's something very, very special about the Buddha's teaching, is that we must take responsibility for our own lives. No one else can make us happy in the truest sense, but ourselves. So with that in mind, why don't we begin the discourse today? So today's discourse is Majjhima Nikaya number 19, Duidhavitaka Sutta. Two kinds of thought. Two kinds of thoughts. So before the Buddha became enlightened, while he was a bodhisattva, he understood that certain kind of thoughts lead to suffering and certain kind of thoughts lead to happiness. So he hadn't realized this fully yet while he was still a bodhisattva, but he understood that we can separate our thoughts into two kind of classes. This is very important, actually. Every moment when we are thinking, if we learn the Buddha's teachings in this way, we can distinguish for ourselves. We have to gain wisdom to do this. We can distinguish for ourselves, am I thinking something that's beneficial or unbeneficial? Do these thoughts lead to my own suffering or not? We can understand that according to the Buddha's teachings. So let's begin. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jaitasguru, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the monks thus. Monks, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this. Monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side, one kind of class, thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side, thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, or thoughts of loving kindness, and thoughts of non-cruelty, thoughts of not harming other beings. Now, I'll say again, if I think there are some newcomers or some people who I haven't seen before, it might be helpful for some of you to take notes about the most important points that you hear. I think that can help us to remember what we learn, and then you can review those in the future and also go back and read the discourse again too. And so the Bodhisattva, what is he doing here? He's separating his thoughts into two categories. So the first category has thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. So can anyone tell me what thoughts of sensual desire means?
Sensual pleasures, sensual desires, like from eyes, what we see, and then we get attracted towards it. What we hear, the sound, what we eat, and we get attracted. For example, lust, such kind of thoughts.
Yes, so thoughts about we could say the 5 objects of sensual pleasure, the desirable, tantalizing, attractive forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and tangible objects, objects that we feel with the body. So thoughts about those things, those objects, desire for those objects. So maybe I can. So what normally happens to us if we're not guarding the 6 senses, we experience something and then we grasp the sign of that object, maybe the pleasant sign of it, something we see, for example. We grasp the pleasant sign of that, and then in the future, that can come to the mind. We can remember that object, that form that we saw, and we remember that with a lustful mind. If you reflect in your own experience, you probably understand this. And so on with sounds, smells, tastes, and touches. A pleasant song that we heard in the past can come to mind, right? And desire arises for that sound. Same thing for a smell. And not only in the past, it's happening in the present too. It's happening about the future. Someone's cooking in the kitchen and there's a nice smell wafting around the house. And desire arises for the smell, right? Or we think about what the food is and we desire to eat that. Desire for the taste, right? So this is happening all the time. We should understand that it's happening all the time. But we can distinguish, as the Buddha's teaching here, what kind of thoughts that we're thinking. And then thoughts of ill will. Can anyone give an example of thoughts of ill will?
Maybe Bante, maybe because he's envy or jealous, so he thinks of something. He wants to do some harm to the other person, to his own benefit.
I think wanting to harm another person would come more closely under thoughts of cruelty or thoughts of harming, but there can be some connection there, right? So if you get angry at someone or remember something that happened at work that day, so and so said this to me, so and so did such a thing, and you get angry about that. So thinking about that again, about the past, with an angry mind, those are thoughts of ill will. Right? You get upset at a person, get upset at certain circumstances, at the news, politics, certain politicians. So this can happen to us. And then if we're angry, can also think about harming such a person. Oh, if such a person, if that coworker lost his job, that would be good. I don't want to see him anymore. Or if such a person gets into some disaster, that'd be good. Thoughts of harming other people. Now to do this, so the Bodhisattva is separating his thoughts into two glasses. It's really amazing what he's doing. To do that, we need a lot of mindfulness, right? We need energy, vidya, effort to examine our own mind. So if we're not mindful, we're not really aware of the thoughts that we're thinking, right? We're thinking them, but they're not fully in our awareness, right? So if we're mindful, we can understand what kind of thoughts that we're thinking. Then the wholesome side of the thoughts is thoughts of renunciation. So these can be thoughts about impermanence, suffering, non-self, that we are subject to aging, sickness, death, that we have to be reborn again in samsara. How do we escape from this suffering? How do we escape from karma? Such kind of thoughts. Thoughts about the foulness of the body, impermanence of sensual pleasures, various kind of thoughts we can think. Mindfulness of death. Then thoughts of non-ill will or thoughts of loving kindness. This is the opposite to thoughts of ill will, right? Instead of getting angry and upset at others, to wish others well-being, to wish for their happiness, to remove one's anger toward others. And then thoughts of non-cruelty or non-harming. So compassion for others, not wishing for others to suffer, but wishing that others be free from the suffering that they experience. Thoughts of non-harming or non-cruelty. As I abided thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. So see the Bodhisattva's thought pattern here. So first he recognized that such a thought arose, right? A thought arose and he understood what it was. Then he understood the nature of that thought. So thought about sensual desire leads to his own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. So when a thought of sensual desire arises, maybe greed for a certain object or person, right? If we act on that thought, we go and maybe steal something from the store. We're walking around the store and we see a desirable object, and we would like to have that, but we don't want to pay for it or whatever reason. Someone decides that they want to steal that. So why does such an action happen? Because of that thought of greed, right? Thought of sensual desire is the basis for that. So say they steal something and they get caught. So they can be fined, they can be imprisoned. So such a thought, such action lead to their own suffering. Stealing something from another person isn't helpful for another person, right? Doesn't lead to their benefit. It leads to suffering for other people too. It leads to suffering of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. So when our mind is overwhelmed, actually, by sensual desire, we can't at that moment think wisely. Our mind is clouded. Same thing with thoughts of ill will and thoughts of harming other people. We don't at that moment understand what is good and what is bad, what is beneficial for us. So even in even in civil law, there's some kind of understanding about this. There's the so someone can plead insanity for a crime, right? When their mind is overwhelmed by certain defilements and they act on those thoughts, a person can plead insanity for the actions that they've done. So what happened? Their mind is overwhelmed by unwholesome thoughts and they act on them. So that moment, they don't understand what is good and bad. And then when the Bodhisattva thought in this way, how this thought of sensual desire causes suffering for oneself, for others, leads away from Nibbana. So that is his goal, right? He left the palace, he renounced his royal life to attain Nibbana. So thinking about sensual thoughts, it's possible that the Bodhisattva can remember his life in the palace, right? So he married princess, right? He had all the sensual pleasures in life. We can remember that after he's gone forth as a monk. But he realized that those kind of thoughts don't lead to the goal that he's seeking. So when he thought in that way, the thought subsided in him. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So we should understand too, this is the Bodhisattva who's left household life and is practicing as a monk. But even for all of you who are living a household life, according to your ability, according to how you want to practice the path, you can also, if you like, separate yourselves from sensuality to some extent. Maybe, I don't know, maybe some of you are even retired. So if so, you have a lot more free time to practice the Dhamma, learn the Dhamma, meditate. So if you want, you can distance yourself from sensual pleasure to a great extent in the household life. So of course the practice in general is different between a monk and a householder because of the lifestyle. But we should understand either way the nature of sensual desire, what it can do to us if it's not controlled. So then in the same way, while the Bodhisattva is exerting energy and trying to purify his mind, thoughts of ill will arise. Maybe something that happened in the village that day while he went for alms round. Someone maybe scolded the Bodhisattva. It's possible, right? And he can remember that. And thoughts of ill will can arise. Same thing about thoughts of cruelty, harming other beings. And in each case, the Bodhisattva reflected about the nature of these thoughts, that they lead to his own affliction, the affliction of others. They obstruct wisdom and lead away from Nibbana. So when he thought in that way, the thought subsided. Now, I think a few months ago, Sangha Bodhibhante taught the Vitaka Santana Sutta about how to remove unwholesome thoughts. So one of the methods is to reflect on the danger of those thoughts, to reflect on the nature that they lead to one's own suffering, lead to the suffering of others. And thinking in that way, it's possible to remove those thoughts. So a person who wants to attain Nibbana, practice the path to attain Nibbana, if thoughts that don't lead to that goal arise in the mind, and one reflects on that fact, that this isn't actually beneficial for me, this isn't the direction I wish to go, then those thoughts can subside. So in this way, the Bodhisattva abandoned, removed, and did away with those unwholesome thoughts when they arose. Monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of sensual desire, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation to cultivate the thought of sensual desire. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of sensual desire. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, he has abandoned the thoughts of non-ill will. He has abandoned loving kindness at that time to cultivate thoughts of ill will. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of ill will. So it becomes very easy for him to get angry if he frequently thinks about thoughts of ill will. If he frequently thinks and ponders about thoughts of harming other people, other beings, he has abandoned the thought of non-harming to cultivate the thought of harming, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of harming. So we should be very careful, actually, about the thoughts we think. So it's not just one moment where the thought is arising, but our mind becomes habituated to that, right? So since these thoughts are unwholesome, since they lead to our own suffering, then if we practice these thoughts, we're habituating our mind to a kind of thinking pattern that leads to suffering. You understand that? So I think it's especially easy to understand with anger, thoughts of ill will. When the mind is overwhelmed by thoughts of ill will, overwhelmed by anger, are we happy at that moment?
No, Bhante.
No, right? Are the people around us, are they happy with us at that moment? Or they avoid us from afar, right? Even our family members, they go into a different room. So we can understand, especially with anger, how anger leads to our own suffering, leads to the suffering of other people. So if we often get angry, if we often think in such a way that leads to anger, then we're habituating ourselves to that pattern, right? So we should be very careful. We should develop effort and mindfulness to remove those thoughts when they arise. So the Buddha taught to remove those unwholesome thoughts in the same posture that one is in, without changing posture. So reflect on that for a moment. How is that an easy thing to do, or is that a tall order? That takes a lot of effort, right? Not physical effort too, mental effort. So while you're walking, to remove that thought while you're continuing to walk, not change postures. While you're sitting down, such a thought arises, such thought of anger arises. To remove that thought of anger before you stand up, before you change your posture. That's the Buddha's, how should we say? That's how the Buddha taught us to practice. So we may be very far away from that, but we should understand that that is the target that we should aim for. And little by little, even if it's slow progress, little by little, if we're approaching that direction, we're approaching that target, then that's a good thing. And thoughts of harming, we should understand too, not just other beings, but ourselves as well. To become overly remorseful about things that happened in the past and to like beat oneself up over it. Those are unwholesome thoughts. We're not happy at that moment, right? When we think such things, we sorrow over things that happened in the past. Unwholesome thoughts. So we can, one simple way to understand it, when we're trying to divide our thoughts in this way, if we're thinking about something and we're not happy about that, if we have a sad state of mind, depressed state of mind, upset state of mind, then that's because of the unwholesome, because of the unwholesome states, defilements. But if we're happy at that moment, then that should be connected with a wholesome state. This is besides sensual pleasure. So a person can gain happiness through sensual pleasure, but that is connected with the unwholesome. So regarding the thoughts that we think, then the Buddha gives a simile, just as in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, when the crops thicken, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be flogged, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So if this cowherd's watching his cows, but the cows go into another person's field and start eating all the barley, eating the corn, then he could be imprisoned, fined, or blamed because of what his cows are doing. So too, I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. So we should also understand in this way, same way the Bodhisattva understood, about our own thoughts. How the unwholesome states, there's a danger in unwholesome states, that we will have to suffer because of them. Like in the simile with the cows, they're degrading, they're connected with defilements. But wholesome states, on the other hand, lead to happiness. They lead to purifying the mind. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of renunciation arose in me. Maybe that's the thought of impermanence. The Bodhisattva is reflecting about how he saw an old man, a sick man, and a dead body, the impermanence of life. So a thought such as that. I understood thus, this thought of renunciation has arisen in me. He has mindfulness, is aware of what he's thinking. This does not lead to my own affliction, or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to Nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. So see the difference between wholesome thoughts and unwholesome thoughts. So when we are angry, for example, the moment we are angry, we are not happy. If we continue to think thoughts of ill will for several hours, for the whole day, we just prolong that state of mental suffering, right? But with thoughts of renunciation, it's not like that. Even if you think thoughts of renunciation the whole day, there's no danger from that. So here we can understand, so this is the Buddha's realization of the wholesome and unwholesome. And this is a very profound thing, actually, for a person to really gain a realization about wholesome and unwholesome. They attain right view. A person who has right view is a stream enterer disciple. It's a noble disciple. So to really understand the wholesome and unwholesome qualities of the mind is a profound level of wisdom, really. But with excessive thinking and pondering, so to think thoughts all day, I might tire my body, and when the body is tired, the mind becomes strained, and when the mind is strained, it is far from concentration, far from samadhi. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be strained. So a person can think thoughts of renunciation all day, but they can become tired from doing that. But, for example, let's say a person practices breathing meditation. The subtle meditation object doesn't have thoughts connected with that, right? You're aware of the in-breath when it's long. You're aware of the in-breath when it's short. You're aware of the out-breath, whether it's long or short. So that leads to calming the mind. It's not connected with thoughts. So breathing meditation, especially if your mind is overwhelmed by thoughts, constantly thinking, and can't stop thinking, that is a very good meditation practice. The Buddha said that that kind of meditation, breathing meditation, should be developed to cut off thoughts, cut off the extraneous thoughts. And that leads to it relaxes the mind. The mind can be freed from thinking to some degree. As I abided thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of non-ill will arose in me, thoughts of loving kindness. Thought of non-cruelty arose in me, thoughts of compassion. And I understood thus, this thought of non-cruelty has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. So same thing with thoughts of ill will, thoughts of non-ill will. So you're thinking thoughts of loving kindness. That doesn't lead to your own suffering, doesn't lead to the suffering of anyone around you, doesn't lead to the suffering of either party. So such thoughts aid wisdom. They assist wisdom. They help us in understanding what is good and bad, what is wholesome and unwholesome. They don't cause difficulties, and such thoughts lead to Nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. So if you think thoughts of loving kindness all day, no harm will come from that. You understand that? This is very profound, actually. So the Buddha is teaching us about our own mind, what kind of thoughts we think normally. So if we think thoughts of loving kindness all day, at home, at work, when we're out and about, maybe in the store, that won't lead to any problems in our life. No problems will come from that. But if we think thoughts of anger, what about that? Very quickly we can get into trouble. Very quickly we can get into problems. Maybe scold someone at work, scold our boss maybe. What happens then? You scold your boss, you get fired the same day. But if you practice loving kindness all day towards your boss, what will happen? No harm will happen. Maybe they might become even more well disposed to you, possible to get a promotion even. So there's the difference between unwholesome and wholesome. We should understand that. But even if you think and ponder in this way the whole day, you can get tired. So the body becomes tired, and then because the body is tired, the mind is tired. So when the mind is tired, it's difficult to attain samadhi. In this way, the Bodhisattva reflected, and he steadied his mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that his mind should not be strained. Monks, whatever a monk frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of renunciation, he has abandoned the thought of sensual desire to cultivate the thought of renunciation, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of loving kindness, and his mind inclines to thoughts of loving kindness. He frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, non-cruelty, compassion. He has abandoned the thought of cruelty to cultivate the thought of non-cruelty, and then his mind inclines to thoughts of non-cruelty. Just as in the last month of the hot season, when all the crops had been brought inside the villages, a cowherd would guard his cows while staying at the root of a tree, be sitting down maybe in the shade of a tree, or out in the open, since he needs only to be mindful that the cows are there. So what happens when there are no crops in the fields? Then there's no danger for the cowherd. His cows can go here and there, wherever they want, and he just sits by watching them because they can't do any harm to him at that time. You understand the Buddha simile? It's a very beautiful simile, actually. So he just needs to be aware that they're there. In the same way, when we're trying to develop wholesome thoughts, if we're skillful at that, if we're clever at doing so, we can just be aware and mindful that those thoughts are there. We don't have to be afraid of what those thoughts will do to us, because they will only bring us happiness. So in the same way, the Bodhisattva only had to be mindful that those wholesome states were there. Tireless energy was aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled, and my mind concentrated and unified. Now these sets of thoughts, there's 6 thoughts in total, right? 3 thoughts in the unwholesome and 3 thoughts in the wholesome. Does anyone recognize these sets of thoughts as some specific set of 3? Thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, thoughts of cruelty, thoughts of harming. Do those 3, when they're put together, do they have some special significance?
Micca Sankappa.
Yes, right. Miccha Sankappa, wrong intention. And
Unwholesome.
what about the 3 wholesome thoughts? Thoughts of
Samma
renunciation.
Sankappa.
Samma Sankappa, right?
Samma.
So to develop the Noble Eightfold Path leading to Nibbana, we have to cultivate what kind of thoughts? Thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of loving kindness, thoughts of compassion, right? And thoughts of renunciation it's not, so the way it's translated, it's difficult to give the full meaning in a few words in English. Thoughts of renunciation doesn't mean thoughts of leaving the household life. It can be that, but thinking about impermanence, thinking about the impermanence of the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, impermanence of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, the impermanence of forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, and mental phenomena, thinking about the foulness of the body, various objects we can think about, thinking about death. We have no idea whether we will die today, tomorrow, this week, this next moment, the next breath we take. We have no idea. That's possible, right? Such thoughts are thoughts of renunciation. And they lead to developing the Noble Eightfold Path. But then, after the Bodhisattva was reflecting in this way, he gradually attained the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th jhanas. So how did he do that? Because he purified his thoughts, right? He purified his mind to some degree, removed the 5 hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, drowsiness and lethargy, restlessness and remorse. Now, remorse can be a thought of harming oneself. We can understand it in that way. And doubt. So when the Bodhisattva understood in this way that this is the nature of these unwholesome thoughts, this is the nature of these wholesome thoughts. So does he need to have doubt about that? When he understands that he suffers because of unwholesome thoughts? When other people suffer because of unwholesome thoughts? So if you actually understand that for yourself in your own experience, you don't need to have any doubt about that. Right? You can move beyond doubt. Abandoning the 5 hindrances, he attained the 4 jhanas. And then gradually he attained to the 3 knowledges. He has the 3 true knowledges. So he realized how beings are traveling in samsara according to the karma that they do by body, speech, and mind. He recollected his own previous lives and understood how he lived in previous lives. He gained the divine eye whereby he could see how other beings pass away and are reborn, maybe as animals in the hell world, as devas, according to the karma that they do. Now, predominantly there are 10 kinds of karma that affect our birth in the next life. Does anyone remember, does anyone know what those 10 kinds of karma are? There are 10 sets of unwholesome karma and 10 sets of wholesome karma. Does anyone know those?
Yes, Bhante.
Yes.
Yes,
Can you
Bhante.
maybe say? Say the
Um,
wholesome.
the
wholesome side.
wholesome one, Bhante. The wholesome one is abstaining from killing beings, abstaining from stealing, abstaining from sexual misconduct, and then the speech, there are 4. So that's abstaining from lying, from divisive speech, from harsh speech, from idle chattering, and for the mental wholesome, it will be the renunciation, no, the non-harming, non-cruelty, and right view, Bhante. Am I right? I
No,
think the whole,
little for the mental karma, little bit mixed up. So
yes. So the
non-covetousness or
no,
not desiring other people's belonging,
yes, yes. Non-ill
non-ill
will
will,
and
and
right
right
view.
view.
Sadhu.
So when beings practice those actions by body, speech, and mind, that leads for them to be reborn in a good destination, as a deva, for example. So if a person has wrong view, they don't believe in karma and its results, they don't believe in a next life, they don't believe in spontaneously born beings, so they don't believe in devas, hell beings, ghosts. They don't believe that there are results of doing good and bad deeds, in giving, and so forth. So there are 2 destinations for such a person who has a wrong view. They'll either be reborn in hell or as an animal, said the Buddha. So if we look at the world, most people have wrong view, right? About 8 billion people in the world, very small percentage have mundane right view, believe in karma and its results, believe that there are results of giving, there are good and bad actions. So we are very fortunate to be able to learn the Buddha's teaching in that way. Otherwise, we would also probably be in the same boat as other people who have wrong view. So with wrong view, it's the conditions for developing the wholesome are not there. Because the view, the basis for that is incorrect. So then, After attaining the second true knowledge, the Bodhisattva attained enlightenment as the Buddha, and he fully realized the Four Noble Truths. Noble truth of suffering, noble truth of the origin of suffering, noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So when he did so, his mind was freed from the defilements, from the asavas, from the taint of sensual desire, the taint of existence, and taint of ignorance. So after that, he understood that there's no more rebirth in samsara. The journey of suffering in samsara is finished. So then the Buddha gives a simile about this. Suppose, monks, that in a wooded range, in a forest, there was a great low-lying marsh, near which a large herd of deer lived. Then a man appeared, desiring their ruin, harm, and bondage, and he closed off the safe and good path to be traveled joyfully. And he opened up a false path, and he put out a decoy and set up a dummy, so that the large herd of deer might later come upon calamity, disaster, and loss. Maybe a hunter comes along and he knows about this herd of deer that's there, and he wants to kill the deer. So he opens a false path, closes the good path, so that the deer will come upon disaster. But another man comes along too, desiring their good, welfare, and protection, and he reopened the safe and good path that led to their happiness, and he closed off the false path, and he removed the decoy and destroyed the dummy, so that the large herd of deer might later come to growth, increase, and fulfillment. Monks, I have given this simile in order to convey a meaning. The great low-lying marsh is a term for sensual pleasures. The large herd of deer is a term for beings. The man desiring their ruin, harm, and bondage is a term for Mara, the evil one. The false path is a term for the wrong eightfold path. Wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, wrong concentration. So practicing the wrong path can lead to wrong result, wrong destination. So what is the wrong destination? Samsara. That path leads to traveling along in samsara. The decoy is a term for delight and lust. The dummy is a term for ignorance. The man desiring their good, welfare, and protection is a term for the Tathagata, Arahan Samma Sambuddha. The safe and good path to be traveled joyfully is a term for the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So, monks, the safe and good path to be traveled joyfully has been reopened by me. The wrong path has been closed off, the decoy removed, the dummy destroyed. Now, the end of this sutta, Buddha gives very important advice, and very beautiful in Pali too. Yanko bhikkhave sattarang karaniya savakanang iteshitanukampakena anukampang upadaya katang votam maya. What should be done for his disciples out of compassion by a teacher who seeks their welfare and has compassion for them, that I have done for you, monks. So what the Buddha should do for his disciples out of compassion for them, he has done all of that. Etani bhikkhave rukkamulani, etani sunyaganani. There are these roots of trees, these empty huts. Jayata bhikkhave, ma pamadatte, ma pacha viparisarino ahuvatte, ayangvo anghakang anusasaniti. Meditate, monks, practice jhana. Do not delay, or else you will regret it later. This is our instruction to you. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So that's how the Buddha ends the discourse, right? Advising the monks. So they learned the Buddha's teachings in this discourse. Now it's up to them to go to a secluded place and meditate. The Buddha has done what he had to do. Has a responsibility as a Buddha to teach the Dhamma. He has done that. Now it's up to the monks to go off alone, practice meditation, and develop the path. It leads to it stirs a sense of urgency up in the monks, right? This advice. So we should also too understand, I think most of you have learned the Dhamma for a very long time, learned a lot of discourses. And I'll answer the question in a moment. So we've learned a lot of Dhamma, but what we have to do, we have to apply that to our lives. Right? It's very important not just to learn the Dhamma, but to actually put it into practice in our own lives. So there's a verse in the Dhammapada, Bahumpi che saitang vasamano, natakkaro hoti naro pamatto, gopo vagavo ganayang paresang, nabhagava samanya suhoti. So even though a monk learns a lot of the Dhamma, maybe he recites a lot of the Dhamma, memorizes a lot of the Dhamma, but he doesn't act accordingly. Natakkaro hoti naro pamatto. The heedless man who doesn't act accordingly to the Dhamma that he learned. Gopo vagavo ganayang paresa. He's like a cowherd counting the cows of other people, not his own cows. Oh, my neighbor has 50 cows. That neighbor has 30 cows. Gopo vagavo ganayang paresa. Nabhagava samanya sahoti. He doesn't partake of the benefits of the spiritual life. So he doesn't gain the results of practicing the Dhamma. He doesn't realize the Dhamma, even though he's learned a lot of the Dhamma. But it's important to put it into practice in one's own life. Now, it's easier said than done, right? So it's one thing, it's difficult to learn the Dhamma, difficult to understand the Dhamma, difficult to practice the Dhamma, right? But it's practicing the Dhamma leads to the greatest benefit that we can obtain in life. So to get the best thing in life is not easy, right? To become free from all suffering in life, the highest goal a person can aspire for in life, is not easy to do that. What to do, right? So we should understand the Buddha's advice at the end of this discourse, that we have to put what we learn into practice. So after we learned about the two categories of thoughts, wholesome and unwholesome, we need to examine our own minds all the time, not just while we meditate for half an hour on a cushion, maybe in the evening or in the morning, but all the time, when we're at home, when we're at work, when we're out and about doing various things, we need to examine our own mind. What kind of thoughts are we thinking? Are we thinking wholesome thoughts or unwholesome thoughts? And if we're thinking unwholesome thoughts, we need to try and remove them. Sangha Bodhi Bhante taught methods for how to do that, Vitaka Santana Sutta. You can look at that again. It's Sutta number 20 in Majjhima Nikaya. That's very helpful. Buddha teaches 5 ways of removing unwholesome thoughts. So, and then by doing so, we can develop right intention in the Noble Eightfold Path. And gradually, by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, we can attain fruits of the path. Right? So that's each person's own responsibility. No one can do it for another. So that's the end of the first discourse. Does anyone have questions before we move to the next 2 discourses? There are 2 small discourses I wanted to teach. So one question was asked in the chat. Are there any other questions?
Bhante, I have a question. Is it okay if I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now Bhante mentioned part of the worldly right view. It's what is it like? You have to believe in the Opapatika Sattva and the Ayang Loko, Paraloko, and all that, right?
Yeah.
So what do you mean by because like there's so many interpretations, right? There's one called Natti Ayang Loko. That means like if you translate that literally, it means they do not believe in this world. So
We
what is like
translated literally, it'd be there is not this world.
there is not this world, right? But what is the actual interpretation? Because I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone who's born believes that this world is there, you know? So I'm sure that there's another interpretation to that.
I think we can understand simply. So not believing that you can be reborn in this world.
That's
A
paraloko.
person, paraloko in the sense of, let's think of not the human world. So paraloko we can understand in the sense of there is another life. And I think we can also understand in the sense of there are other worlds besides the human world. So it's possible to be reborn in a Deva world. But ayang loko, to be reborn again in this human world. So a person can die here, maybe in Canada, and be reborn again in Sri Lanka, in India.
I see. And Bhante, these 10 views, do you like is it a must to have them before you can
Yes.
progress? But if that's the case, like it's not, I guess it's like it's a general thing, right? Like in general, it's true, but it's not applicable to everyone, right? Like for example, like if we take Angulimala, right? Like he was about to kill his mother, right? So definitely we know he does not believe that the mother is a special person, right? But then even then, like he still progressed on the path, right? He heard some verses and then he became Sotapanna, right? So I mean, and then another one is that who is it? That Alavaka, right? I mean, he did not believe that what is it? There's that Samana Brahmana. That there's one, yeah. So he doesn't believe that, right? So but even then, like he was still able to progress on the path, right? So is it that's why I'm thinking like it's not like an absolute truth
We
like
should
that
understand.
applies to everyone. Is that
We should understand this way. So when they began to practice the path, they developed that right view. So without developing that right view, we can't progress in the path actually. So because the conditions aren't there. So if a person doesn't believe in good and bad karma, what incentive do they have to refrain from bad karma and to practice good karma? They have no
because
incentive at all, right?
well the thing is no, because you can see the effects in this life, right? Like someone can say, okay, I don't care about what happens after life, but if I follow these, I can be happy within this moment, right? Why worry about, what's coming after if you can, like if you can be happy within this life at this moment, right?
Well, so okay, such a person could maybe have some understanding or could believe in good and bad, but their view isn't fully purified in that respect, because karma involves not only this life but also the next life, right? So maybe they're getting some part of it, but not the full thing.
Right.
And to really gain benefits from the Buddha's path, we can think very simply. So if a person doesn't believe in a next life, how would they become free from samsara?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, you don't have to believe the whole thing all at once, right? You can go like step by step, right? Like however much you see, you can follow that, and then you just keep on progressing from there. You don't have to accept the whole thing all at once, right?
Well,
Like
a
like for
person
example,
might.
like
Yeah.
personally, I'm skeptical about um all these like heavens and hells and everything, but I'm still gonna keep. But I agree that okay, with this loba and the dosa and all that, it leads to our own suffering. I understand that okay, if someone has hatred or anger, it's gonna lead to our suffering as well as other people's suffering because of loba. That's the reason for all these. Loba actually can also lead to dosa, and loba is the reason why a lot of the problems, a lot of stealing, rapes, all of that is because of actually loba. Even some of the killings are because of loba. So actually you can logically reason all that out, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think we can think in this way. A person might not be able to accept everything at once,
Yeah.
but when they learn the Dhamma, when they, so in your case, when you're speaking about how, so you understand the
Yes.
Buddhist teachings on Loba Dosa, right? In this life, how they lead to suffering. So that's the Buddha's realization, right? Where he's teaching that. So there are some things that we may not be able to understand right away. But if we learn the Buddha's teaching and we gain confidence in the things that we can understand, things that we do see, we can accept out of faith in the Buddha those things that he teaches that we can't directly verify. So the Buddha teaches there are other worlds. The Buddha is very clear in the Buddha's teachings too. There are words such as kaya subedha parang marana, on the breakup of the body after death. A being is reborn in a good destination, reborn in a bad destination. So it's very clear in the Buddha's teaching that the Buddha teaches a next life. Now, that is the main danger for us, actually. So the human life is a good destination in Buddha's teachings. So there is, of course, suffering in this life, but compared to the life of an animal, which animals are for the most part afraid all the time, wild animals, afraid of being killed and eaten, and they're searching for food their entire life. A lot of suffering in the animal world. And the Buddha explains the suffering of hells in Devadutta Sutta, Balapandita Sutta, and also the happiness of heaven in Balapandita Sutta. So we may not see those, of course, but out of faith in the Buddha, we should try to develop our faith in the Buddha to accept those. And the way we should think actually is the Buddha is my teacher. I've gone for refuge to the Buddha. I should humbly accept out of faith what the Buddha teaches. And so that's how a disciple should think. When the Buddha teaches there is such a world, even if we don't see that, we should understand the Buddha's realization is vast. The Buddha has such a realization that he can see these other worlds. I don't have such an ability. So out of faith in the Buddha, we should try to accept them. Now, it might not happen all at once, but at a minimum, we should try to base ourselves on that mundane right view. And then we have the chance to develop more and more wholesome states, leading to Nibbana. So I hope that answered your question. There are a few other questions I
So
also
that
need to
means
answer.
Bante, everyone who progressed in the path, they all started from faith and they accepted everything, right? And they accepted these 10 views. even if they don't see it, and then they went on from there. So it's not like what is it like what if someone doesn't have that, but they still do, like, the satipatthana and all that, right? Like they'll still reap some benefit even if they don't, accept the whole thing, right? And then when they automatically do the satipatthana, they actually get the jhanas and everything, and then they can actually confirm it for themselves, right? Without actually having it on faith.
Without right view as the basis, it's impossible to attain right concentration. Everyone who developed the path, now, like I said, it might not happen all at once, but we should try to develop the 5 powers of a trainee: Shraddha, Sila, Shruta, Tyaga, Prajna, faith, virtue, knowledge of the Dhamma, generosity, and wisdom. So right view is actually this mundane right view is actually related to wisdom. So understanding the true reality of life, this world, the next world, what is wholesome and unwholesome. So a person who doesn't believe in a next life, that view, not believing in a next life, is a cause and condition for many unwholesome states to arise. Why? Because they have free reign, so to speak, to act however they want. Because if there are no consequences for them in the next life, then it doesn't become a problem for them. So a person might not be able to accept everything at once, but everyone, I think we can say, everyone who developed the path, who gained fruits of the path, all believed in these factors of right view. Now, there are some other questions to answer, and I also want to finish
Okay,
2 more
Bhante,
suttas.
sadhu.
So let me, I think we'll have to move on. 7 new messages as well. So the first question that was asked, why is sexual desire unwholesome? If both parties consent, we aren't harming anyone in this case. Okay, so we should understand it's important to distinguish between sexual desire or sensual desire and sexual misconduct. So all desire is unwholesome, all sensual desire is unwholesome to some degree. So it, as part of craving, right? So desire leads to rebirth in samsara, according to paticca samuppada, according to dependent origination. But, so kama tanha, craving for sensual pleasures, is part of the noble truth of the origin of suffering. But the Buddha distinguishes between sexual conduct and sexual misconduct. So sexual misconduct is one of the 10 causes for unwholesome karma. As Linda explained, the 10 sets of wholesome karma, abstaining from sexual misconduct is wholesome. So if a person is married and they're engaging in a physical relationship with their spouse, that is not sexual misconduct. So it's not one of the bases of unwholesome karma. But we should understand that kama tanha, sensual desire, is an aspect of craving, which leads to rebirth in samsara. Pono bhavika, this leads to renewed existence in samsara. So you aren't harming anyone in the case where it's say a marriage, for example. Yeah, so that's not sexual misconduct. But for example, a clear example, rape, for example, would fall under sexual misconduct. So the mental state in a marriage. 2, both sensual desire, right, is present. But in one situation, the action that a person is carrying out falls under sexual misconduct. So we should understand that difference. Sensual desire is a mental defilement, but sexual misconduct is something else. Right? I hope that answered your question. Then the next question, from where can I find 10 sets of unwholesome and wholesome karma, Bhante? You can look in, there's a discourse in the Majjhima Nikaya that explains all of them in detail. It is, this is the sutta I had in mind. And I didn't mention, so for a lay disciple of the Buddha, in the 5 precepts, the 3rd precept is to abstain from sexual misconduct. So for a lay disciple practicing the 5 precepts, celibacy is not mandatory. Right? So a person doesn't need to live like a monk or a nun to practice the Buddha's teachings as a layman or a laywoman. They should just abstain from sexual misconduct. Then, yeah, so Jenny mentioned the Mahachattari Sutta that explains too, right view in the sense of mundane and supermundane. Mundane right view being the accepting good and bad karma, accepting results of giving, next life, spontaneously reborn beings, and that there are ascetics and Brahmins who have attained realization in the way. Let's go on to the next sutta. So I wanted to try to, from the Buddha's discourses, to explain how in practice the thoughts that we think influence our surroundings, influence our lives. So we learned in the Duidhavitaka Sutta, what kind of thoughts are unwholesome, what kind of thoughts are wholesome, what kind of thoughts we should think, what kind of thoughts we should try to abandon. So in Anguttara Nikaya 3.124, maybe, I think if another link could be sent out to that again, it was sent before, but. So the Buddha teaches, wherever monks take to arguing and quarreling and fall into a dispute, stabbing each other with piercing words, I am uneasy even about directing my attention there, let alone about going there. I conclude about them, surely those venerable ones have abandoned 3 things and cultivated 3 other things. What are the 3 things they have abandoned? Thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of goodwill, and thoughts of non-harming. These are the 3 things they have abandoned. What are the 3 things they have cultivated? Sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of harming. These are the 3 things they have cultivated. So the Buddha is speaking about monks here, but I think we can apply it in general to people in general. So whenever people are arguing and quarreling with one another, angrily speaking to one another, what is the reason for that? They are living disharmoniously. The reason is that they are thinking 3 kinds of unwholesome thoughts, and they are not thinking 3 kinds of wholesome thoughts. So at home, if you get into arguments with your spouse, your children, other family members, what is the reason for that? Because thinking unwholesome thoughts, thinking thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, thoughts of harming, and not thinking thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of loving kindness, thoughts of compassion. So just think, for example, getting into an argument with a family member. So if you're thinking about impermanence, about the nature that this life is very short, we are going to die soon, there's no point in doing unwholesome deeds, there's no point in getting angry, it'll just lead to suffering for oneself and others. If you're thinking in those kind of thoughts, does that lead to an argument or not? Such kind of thoughts don't lead to arguments. You're thinking thoughts of loving kindness about everyone in your surroundings, people who you live with. That doesn't lead to arguments. You're thinking thoughts of compassion for others. That doesn't lead to arguments, to getting into trouble with other people. Same thing at your workplace. So the thoughts we think not only influence our own lives, but also the lives of the community that we live in. So if we abandon unwholesome thoughts and we develop wholesome thoughts, we can live harmoniously with the people around us. Is one of the benefits. If we think unwholesome thoughts and we abandon wholesome thoughts, that will lead to discord with the people around us. So for example, a person gets into trouble at work, they get upset about something that happened at work, and they take that anger back home with them. So they are angry at home, they're still thinking about what happened during the day, and they're angry. Now, by thinking those thoughts, does that lead to harmony in the family or not?
No,
Might not
Bhante.
even be related to the family. It's about something that happened at work. But it doesn't lead to harmony, right? Then the Buddha says, monks, wherever monks are dwelling in concord, harmoniously, without disputes, blending like milk and water, that's a very beautiful simile, viewing each other with eyes of affection. I am at ease about going there, let alone about directing my attention there. I conclude, surely those venerable ones have abandoned three things and cultivated three things. What are the three things they have abandoned? Sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of harming. These are the three things they have abandoned. And what are the three things they have cultivated? Thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of goodwill, and thoughts of non-harming. These are the three things they have cultivated. Do you understand the discourse? A very short discourse. It explains how our relationships in life are influenced by the thoughts we think. So in monastic life, if monks are thinking about sensual thoughts, thinking thoughts of ill will toward other monks, thinking thoughts of harming others. Oh, I wish such and such a monk, I wish he would leave, I wish he would fail in some way. To think in such a way doesn't lead to harmony in the community. It doesn't lead to concord. So if we want to be happy not only internally in our personal lives, but also in the relationships that we have in other people, at home and at work, we should try to develop right intention. Spread loving kindness toward others. Not think thoughts of anger. Not think thoughts of harming. To wish others welfare. Right? There's also a verse from Dhammapada. Pare chana vijananti mayameti amamase ye tattva vijananti tato sammanti mediga. There are some people who don't understand that one day we will all die. But those who understand this, they settle their quarrels. We think in that way, right? We're reflecting on mindfulness of death. Why get angry at someone else? Or if you get angry at someone else, why prolong that? Why get into an argument? It's pointless. Right? The thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of loving kindness, thoughts of compassion that we can cultivate will lead to harmony in the home, in our lives, at work, right? And we can see this for ourselves. You can practice this and try to see it for yourself in your own life. Any questions about this discourse before we go to the next one? Okay. The next discourse is Anguttara Nikaya 3.95. I only wanted to take a small part of this. The Buddha is teaching about a harmonious assembly, so a group of people that are living in harmony. Here, the assembly in which the monks dwell in concord, harmoniously, without disputes, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with eyes of affection, is called the harmonious assembly. So how do people live in harmony? They don't dispute, they don't argue with one another. They blend like milk and water. What happens when you mix milk and water together? They don't separate into layers, right? Like oil and water. Mix milk and water, it's a homogeneous mixture, right? So people can also behave in the same way. To not break off into separate groups among one another. Viewing each other with eyes of affection, called the harmonious assembly. So we can sometimes read a person's mental state from their expression, right? Their facial expression. You can tell if a person's angry, right, by looking at their face. So when we look at others, we should try to practice this, to look at others with eyes of affection, loving kindness, compassion, when we look at other people. If we look at others and we think about how they've harmed us in the past, how they made us suffer in the past, all the wrong things they have done, that doesn't lead to affection between the two of us. That doesn't lead to harmony in our relationships. Now, the Buddha says, when the monks are dwelling in concord, harmoniously, without disputes, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with eyes of affection, on that occasion, they generate much merit. By living in that way, they accrue a lot of merit. On that occasion, the monks dwell in a divine abode, Brahma Vihara. That is the liberation of mind through altruistic joy. So when they're practicing in this way, living in harmony, they are practicing mudita, meditation on altruistic joy. Now, can anyone tell me what mudita is, what altruistic joy is? What does that
Bhante,
mean?
isn't it when you're happy for other people's success, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're happy about other people's success, about other people's growth, development. Now, what normally happens, right, is that we can become jealous of others when they're successful. So becoming jealous of others when they're successful means we can't bear the fact that they are happy, that they are successful, that they are benefiting something. We can't bear that. That's jealousy. Mudita is different. Mudita is to be genuinely happy about someone else's success, about someone else's development in life, that they are succeeding, that they are benefiting in some way. For us to also be happy about it, to rejoice in that. That's mudita. Now, mudita, I think, is very special in the Buddha's teaching. So in other religions, there might be some kind of loving kindness, some kind of compassion that the other religions might teach. But in the Buddhist teaching, mudita and upekkha, altruistic joy and equanimity, I think are very special. I don't think you find such teachings in other religions. To be genuinely happy about another person's success. I've never heard of that before the Buddhist teachings. I've never heard of that anywhere else. And it's a really beautiful quality that we can cultivate. So we should practice thinking in this way. There are thoughts that we can think. So when we see someone to think, oh, how great it would be if this person lived long, had a long and successful life, if they live a healthy life, if they improve in their wealth, beauty, lifespan, happiness, and authority in life. If they get a promotion, how great it would be if they get a promotion at work. How great it would be if their salary increased. How wonderful would it be if they were able to get all the things they desire in life, to become famous. They're really beautiful thoughts we can think about other people. Or how wonderful would it be if this person developed in faith in the Buddha? If they became virtuous, if they learned the Dhamma really well, if they became a very generous person, they develop in generosity, they develop in wisdom, if they realize the Four Noble Truths, how wonderful would it be? How great would it be for this person to attain Nibbana in this life? How wonderful. We can think in this way. We can aspire for another person's happiness. Instead of thinking thoughts of jealousy, this is the way we should think. Now the Buddha explains that thinking in this way, when one is joyful, rapture arises. So thinking in this way gives rise to joy in the mind, happiness in the mind, connected with the wholesome. For one with a rapturous mind, piti manasakayam kayo pasambati. For one with a rapturous mind, the body becomes tranquil. The body becomes at ease. One tranquil in body feels pleasure. For one feeling pleasure, the mind becomes concentrated, attains samadhi. What is the Buddha explaining here? He's explaining the causes and conditions for attaining samadhi. Do you understand? A person can't attain samadhi just by sitting on a cushion and making a resolution to attain samadhi, right? It doesn't work that way. So if a person wants to attain samadhi, they have to develop the causes and conditions in their mind. So this is one way to do it. This is one way to practice samadhi, to practice mudita, the way we think about other people around us. We are thinking, wishing for their success, wishing for another person's happiness. In that way, joy can arise in the mind, and gradually the mind can become concentrated. Buddha gives a simile for this. Just as when it is raining and the rain pours down in thick droplets on the mountaintop, the water flows down along the slope and fills the clefts, gullies, and creeks. These, becoming full, fill up the pools. These, becoming full, fill up the lakes. These, becoming full, fill up the streams. These, becoming full, fill up the rivers. And these, becoming full, fill up the ocean. So too, when the monks dwell in concord, harmoniously, without disputes, without arguing with one another, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with eyes of affection, on that occasion they generate much merit. On that occasion, the monks dwell in a divine abode, that is, the liberation of mind through altruistic joy. So to practice altruistic joy leads to harmony in our relationships in life. So instead of being jealous about a coworker at work, we should wish for their success. And that will lead to happiness in our own mind and harmony in our relationship with that person. When one is joyful, rapture arises. For one with a rapturous mind, the body becomes tranquil. One tranquil in body feels pleasure. For one feeling pleasure, the mind becomes concentrated, attains samadhi. So if a person wants to attain samadhi, what they should practice is wholesome thoughts. In Duidhavitaka Sutta, the Buddha explains, once he's categorizing these two sets of thoughts, when he's practicing wholesome thoughts, making wholesome thoughts, gradually attains the 4 jhanas, because he has removed the unwholesome thoughts, right? And by thinking on wholesome thoughts, joy arises in the mind. There's a happiness connected with wholesome states, not connected with sensual pleasure, but connected with wholesome mental states. And in that way, we can develop samadhi. There are many ways to do this, not just mudita, but also reflecting on the Buddha's qualities, qualities of the Dhamma, qualities of the Sangha, one's own virtue. Many ways to practice this. So I hope in this way we were able to understand the nature of our thoughts, wholesome and unwholesome thoughts, and how wholesome thoughts lead to our own benefit in life, our personal benefit and to the benefit of people around us, even harmony in our relationships. Now, these thoughts don't just lead to that, but they're also part of the Noble Eightfold Path, right? Right intention, which leads to Nibbana. So for these reasons, it's enough to practice wholesome thoughts, right? Leads to many kinds of happiness we can aspire for in this life. So in this way, what we learned today, may we all have the opportunity to abandon unwholesome thoughts, which lead to our own affliction, and develop wholesome thoughts, which lead to happiness in our own mind, harmony and happiness in our relationships in life, and help us develop the Noble Eightfold Path leading to Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Any questions?
Avsarai Bante, I have a small doubt regarding protecting the precepts. Bante, when it comes to 4 days, there's one precept called refrain from entertainment. But Bante, sometimes it's really hard to control the thoughts we come. So can I know a small strategies to control the mind and abstain from those?
Yes. So do you mean like watching TV, listening to music, that kind of thing?
Yes, Bante.
So what is your question? It's very difficult to do that.
Yes, Bante. A bit difficult, sometimes really hard to protect that precept. So a small advice to protect that.
That's a good question you have. How about this? So I think it's more difficult for you now because the monastery is still closed, right?
Oh, sorry, Bante. I think Anuja Putta is from Sri Lanka, Bante.
Ah, really? He's joining from
Yes,
Sri
Bante.
Lanka.
Yes, Bante.
Okay. Well then, either way, I think that he wouldn't be participating in a Day program at the monastery itself because of the pandemic still. What I think you can do, Anuja Putta, I think it can be helpful for you to try to distance yourself from electronic things. So if you turn off your phone, and give it to your parents for the day. To go into a different room, don't stay in the same room with the TV or the computer. And try to listen to Dhamma talks or read books, practice meditation. It can be difficult to practice. So the Buddha called these, in Pali the word is sikkhapada. It means like training. We are trying to train the mind, trying to practice something. So sometimes we can't do it right away, 100%. But we can little by little try to practice. And I think one thing that might help you, you can think, have you learned about impermanence?
Yes, Bhante.
So you can think about the impermanence of those entertainments. So you watch a TV show, right? You watch a film, and after it's over, where is the happiness? It's gone, right? The Buddha compared sensual pleasures like a dream. So you're sleeping and you have a dream, but when you wake up, there's nothing, right? So it's like that. There's some happiness there, but if we practice the Buddha's teachings, we can gain a deeper happiness inside, peace inside our lives. So for one day of the month, we should try very hard to keep the precept. And we can practice patience, right? So if it's very difficult to practice the precept, think to yourself, okay, I will practice the precept today. I will not break the precept today. Tomorrow I can watch TV. Tomorrow I can play a computer game. But today I will practice precept. Right? So you have a goal, right? It's only one day. So I think if you think that way, you can be patient and try to practice. If it's very difficult, don't get upset though. We are all trying to practice. We can have difficulties. That's okay.
Many minutes, Bhante.
Bhante, is it like what Buddha says about sense restraint? We should condition ourselves to, restrain from all the senses.
Sense restraint is a deep topic. That's
That.
true. What you said is true. If we can restrain our senses, then we can purify our virtue in that way.
Bhante, I'd just like to add one thing. Regarding the sense restraint, a nice sutta I found was the Bahya Sutta. Right, I'm just gonna share it in the chat for you all. Right, I found it helpful. It's basically whatever you experience, you only experience the sights, the sounds, the sense, and so on. Just those five. You don't think further than that. And it's actually pretty helpful. So yeah, you guys should check that out. I put it in the comments.
That's a very deep sutta, actually. The Venerable Bahi becomes an arahant after he hears that.
Yeah.
I think if there are no more questions, we can end for today.
Bhante, I think there's one
late
more
for the-
in the question from Surya Kumar.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I just see it. Okay, that's a good question you asked. So, social media, video games, computer games, TV, that wouldn't come under the fifth precept. That would come under the precepts you observe on the Uposatha day, the 8 precepts. So abstaining from those things would come under the 8 precepts. And addiction to that is another thing. So to be addicted to it, to have the mind be obsessed by such a thing, is something else. but it's not directly under the fifth precept. The fifth precept would be, so it says specifically, Sura Mere Majja Pamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapada. So Sura Mere, Sura, as I understand, I think is the like beers, fermented like grain liquor, and Mere is like wine, the things made of from fruit, like alcohol made from fruit. Majja Pamadatthana, so that are a basis for heedlessness. So the point of the precept is like alcohol and drugs, abstaining from alcohol and drugs. Other things can be addicting too, like video games and Facebook, but they don't come under this precept. So what if you find it's a problem in your life and it's leading to difficulties, you can try to abstain from that as much as you wish. And it may be difficult at first, but little by little, if you're able to practice that and see the disadvantages of addiction to that, then I think you'd be able to distance yourself from it. So what social media in particular, social media is a platform where a lot of unwholesome states get free reign. So if you look at in social media what people type, and if you compare with right speech and wrong speech, a lot of wrong speech, right? People can lie, people can break others' friendships with divisive speech, insult one another with harsh speech, and speak or type all sorts of useless information would fall under idle chatter. So, and then when we read all of that, the mind is polluted with unwholesome states. That doesn't help us develop wholesome states to practice meditation. So at least if you're practicing the 8 precepts, if you're not practicing the 8 precepts once a month, you should try to do so. On that day, at minimum, you should try to abstain from those things. And then that can, I think, help you remove any addiction you have toward them. And then if you're able to do it once a month, then in the future you can try to do it maybe once every weekend, every Saturday, you can try to abstain from those things. If you're able to do that, then every Saturday and Sunday. Now you have 8 days in a month. Little by little, you can try to improve. We have another person raising their hand. Subin?